The mystery of Oak Island, the world's most famous treasure hunt. The beginning of the legend. In the late summer of 1795, when the winds were soft and the skies were clear over Nova Scotia, a young boy named Daniel McGuinness wandered along the rugged coastline of Oak Island, a small, forested landmass tucked away in Mahone Bay, Canada. He was only a teenager then, full of curiosity and energy, someone who loved to explore the mysteries of nature around him. On that particular day, his wandering led him to a strange clearing where the ground looked unusually disturbed, as if the earth had once been moved by human hands. What caught his attention most was a large old oak tree standing proudly at the edge of this depression, and hanging from one of its branches was a rotting rope, the kind that might have once been used to lower heavy objects into the ground. The place gave off an odd feeling, as if it carried a secret buried deep within, and Daniel, though young, could sense that this was no ordinary patch of land. He rushed to gather his two close friends, Anthony Vaughan and John Smith, and together they returned to the spot, their hearts pounding with anticipation of what they might uncover. The boys decided to dig, and so began one of the greatest and most enduring treasure hunts in history. Their first discovery came quickly. Just 2 feet beneath the surface they found a layer of flagstones, carefully placed, which was unusual in such a location. Clearing them away, they dug further and were amazed to discover a layer of logs tightly packed across the shaft about 10 feet down. The boys removed them and continued. At 20 feet, another layer of logs appeared. At 30 feet, yet another. It was as if someone had built a deliberately engineered shaft, with levels of wood covering each stage, a design too purposeful to be an accident. The deeper they went, the stranger it all seemed. The soil showed signs of being disturbed long ago, pick marks were found on the walls of the shaft, and each level appeared to be carefully constructed to hide or protect something. Could it be a treasure? Could it be a secret hidden centuries earlier by pirates, or perhaps by explorers who wanted to safeguard something precious? For Daniel and his friends, the excitement was overwhelming, but they were still just boys. Exhaustion soon forced them to stop the digging, though the mystery of the pit consumed their imaginations. They could not shake the feeling that Oak Island was guarding something extraordinary. Years later, when John Smith grew older, he purchased a portion of Oak Island, including the site of the mysterious pit, believing that someday its secret would be revealed. By then, word of the discovery had spread through the small communities of Nova Scotia, and whispers of buried treasure began to circulate among the people. Treasure in those days was not merely a dream, it was a real possibility. The 18th century was full of stories about pirates like Captain Kidd, Blackbeard, and Henry Morgan, men who plundered ships and needed safe places to bury their stolen wealth. The idea that Oak Island might hold such a fortune was not far-fetched. The pit, with its layers of timber, was unlike anything seen before, and soon it became known as the Money Pit. The early 19th century saw the first serious attempts to excavate the pit beyond what the boys had achieved. In 1803, a group known as the Onslow Company formed with the specific goal of retrieving whatever lay hidden below. With manpower, tools, and determination, they resumed digging, following the same pattern the boys had discovered. At every 10-foot interval, another platform of logs was uncovered, almost like steps leading further into the unknown. At 90 feet, the diggers found something extraordinary, a large, flat stone covered in strange carvings and symbols. The stone was unlike anything the workers had ever seen. The symbols did not match English, French, or any language they recognized. It was a riddle carved into stone, and though they could not read it, the very existence of such writing suggested that whoever had constructed the pit had gone to incredible lengths to conceal a secret. The stone was eventually removed, but what it meant remains one of the greatest mysteries of Oak Island. Many years later, some claimed the inscription had been translated to say, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Others argued this translation was a hoax, or at least exaggerated, but the legend had already taken root. The belief that unimaginable wealth lay just beneath their feet fueled even greater efforts to continue digging. But Oak Island was not about to give up its secret so easily. The Onslow Company pressed on, but soon they encountered a problem that would baffle treasure hunters for centuries to come: flooding. At around 90 feet, the shaft suddenly filled with water. No matter how hard they tried, they could not bail it out. The pit seemed to be connected to some hidden system of tunnels that allowed the waters of Mahone Bay to rush in and block further progress. The workers tried various methods to drain the pit, but each effort was defeated. It was almost as if the pit itself was designed as a trap to prevent intruders from reaching whatever lay buried at the bottom. The flood defeated the Onslow Company, and eventually they were forced to abandon the dig. Yet the legend had now taken hold firmly. Oak Island was not just a curiosity anymore, it was a puzzle, a trap, and possibly the resting place of the greatest treasure ever hidden. As the years passed, other groups of investors and treasure hunters were drawn to Oak Island, each one convinced that they could succeed where others had failed. Some believed that pirates had buried gold. Others thought the pit might contain lost manuscripts, perhaps even documents proving that Shakespeare's plays were written by someone else entirely. Still others whispered about secret societies, like the Knights Templar, who was said to have traveled to the New World with holy relics and hidden them for safekeeping. Theories flourished, but evidence remained scarce, and the pit itself proved treacherous to anyone who challenged it. But one thing was certain: Oak Island had become the most famous treasure hunt in North America. From that day in 1795, when Daniel McGinnis first stumbled upon the mysterious depression under the oak tree, the island's legend grew larger with each failed attempt to solve its riddle. The money pit was no ordinary hole in the ground, it was a story machine, creating myths, inspiring adventurers, and swallowing fortunes. And as the 19th century advanced, the hunger to unearth its secret only grew stronger. The treasure rush. By the middle of the 19th century, the legend of Oak Island had spread far beyond Nova Scotia. What began as the curiosity of three boys had become a story whispered in taverns, printed in newspapers, and carried across the seas. Oak Island was no longer just a quiet patch of forest in Mahone Bay, it was a beacon for treasure hunters, a place where the promise of riches seemed just within reach, if only the traps could be defeated. The mysterious money pit had gained a reputation for being both inviting and dangerous, an enigma that lured men with dreams of gold but punished them with frustration and financial ruin. The first major effort after the Onslow Company came in 1849, when a group calling itself the Truro Company was formed. Unlike the earlier diggers, these men had better tools, more money, and a stronger determination to solve the mystery. They knew of the layers of logs, they knew of the strange stone carved with symbols, and they knew of the sudden flooding that had defeated the previous team. They came prepared with pumps, augers, and new ideas to overcome what they now believed was an elaborate booby trap designed to keep treasure seekers away. The Truro Company began drilling into the shaft with an auger, a kind of giant drill meant to bring up samples from deep underground. Their hope was to pierce whatever treasure lay beneath without being stopped by water. The auger went down past the 90-foot level, and soon it brought up small bits of wood, as if boring through chests. Then, to their astonishment, it brought up something even more exciting: fragments of metal. Some accounts say they recovered tiny links of gold chain, while others mention flecks of precious metal embedded in the wood. Whatever the truth, the Truro Company became convinced that treasure was indeed hidden deep below, possibly locked away in wooden boxes or casks. Their imaginations ran wild. Could it be pirate gold? Could it be Spanish silver? Could it be something even more valuable, like sacred relics? The excitement was overwhelming, and investors poured in money to fund the dig. But again, the pit itself turned against its seekers. The deeper they went, the worse the flooding became. It was as though the pit were alive, fighting back, determined to guard its secrets forever. The water poured in so quickly that their pumps could not keep up. After weeks of exhausting effort, the Truro Company realized they were beaten, just as the Onslow Company had been decades earlier. With broken spirits and empty pockets, they abandoned their quest, leaving behind only more questions and legends for the future. The flooding of the pit became one of its most puzzling mysteries. In time, investigators discovered that Oak Island contained a complex system of tunnels that appeared to run from the money pit out to the nearby shore. These tunnels seemed to act like pipes, channeling seawater into the shaft whenever someone tried to dig too deep. The conclusion was startling: someone, long ago, had engineered an advanced flooding system to protect whatever was buried at the bottom. This was no simple pirate hiding spot. Whoever had built the money pit had incredible knowledge of engineering and the foresight to create a trap that would last for centuries. As word spread of this discovery, interest in Oak Island only grew. To some, it seemed proof that the pit contained not just treasure, but a treasure so important that it had to be protected with brilliant defenses. By the 1850s, Oak Island was becoming a magnet for adventurers, engineers, and storytellers alike. Each failure only added to the mystery, making the treasure seem more real and more tantalizing. In the 1860s, another group of investors formed the Oak Island Association, determined to succeed where the others had failed. They believed the secret to conquering the pit was not to fight the water, but to outwit it. If the tunnels that allowed seawater in could be blocked, then perhaps the pit could be drained and the treasure finally reached. So the diggers began to explore the island itself, searching for signs of these mysterious flood tunnels. And they found them, on the beach at Smith's Cove, about 500 feet from the pit. There, beneath the sand, they discovered a carefully constructed system of drains, arranged in a pattern like the fingers of a hand, each one leading toward the money pit. The drains were filled with layers of coconut fiber and eelgrass, materials that could filter water and prevent clogging, ensuring that the trap would remain functional for centuries. The sophistication of this design shocked even the most skeptical minds. Who could have built such an elaborate system on a small island in Nova Scotia? And why? The Oak Island Association believed they were close to solving the mystery. They attempted to block the tunnels by digging a counter shaft, hoping to cut off the water before it reached the money pit. But the island seemed to resist them at every step. The water continued to pour in, filling their shafts and defeating their pumps. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous the work became. And then tragedy struck. One day, while digging a new shaft near the pit, the wall suddenly collapsed, burying several men under tons of earth. At least 2 workers were killed instantly, becoming the first recorded victims of Oak Island. The deaths cast a shadow over the entire project. Suddenly, the money pit no longer seemed just mysterious, it seemed cursed. But even tragedy could not kill the legend. If anything, it made the story of Oak Island even more compelling. The fact that men were willing to risk their lives, and even lose them, in the search for treasure only added to the aura of danger and allure surrounding the pit. People began to whisper that the island was under a curse, and that no treasure would be found until 7 men had died. Whether this prophecy was invented later or grew out of superstition, it became one of the most enduring parts of the Oak Island legend. By the late 19th century, Oak Island had become famous not just in Canada, but around the world. Newspapers printed stories about it, fueling wild speculation about what lay beneath. Some believed it was the lost treasure of the notorious pirate Captain Kidd, who was rumored to have hidden his wealth in secret locations before his capture. Others argued it might be Spanish treasure from galleons that had sailed the seas during the Age of Exploration. Still others whispered about the Knights Templar, a powerful medieval order rumored to have brought their sacred relics, perhaps even the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, to the New World to keep them safe. The theories multiplied with each passing year, and each one made the money pit seem even more legendary. Despite the failures and the tragedies, one thing was clear: the mystery of Oak Island was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The 19th century treasure hunters may have been defeated by water, by engineering traps, and by tragedy, but their efforts kept the fire of curiosity alive. They proved that the money pit was no ordinary hole, but a construction of genius, a riddle left behind by unknown hands. And with each new generation of seekers, Oak Island's legend grew stronger, more complex, and more irresistible. By the dawn of the 20th century, Oak Island was no longer just a local story, it was an international obsession. And the world's most determined adventurers, wealthy businessmen, and brilliant engineers were ready to take up the challenge. The curse had claimed its first victims, but the promise of unimaginable treasure kept calling out across the seas. The island's greatest secrets remained hidden, but the legend of Oak Island was now unstoppable. The curse awakens. As the 20th century dawned, Oak Island had already earned a reputation as one of the world's most puzzling mysteries. The money pit had lured treasure hunters for more than 100 years, draining their fortunes, testing their courage, and in some cases, even taking their lives. Yet, despite the failures and the tragedies, the island's allure only grew stronger. The whispers of gold and sacred relics buried beneath its soil reached the ears of wealthy businessmen, daring explorers, and even presidents. Oak Island was no longer just a local legend, it was an obsession of global proportions. By the early 1900s, the so-called Curse of Oak Island had already begun to take shape. After the deaths in the 19th century, the belief spread that the island demanded 7 lives before its treasure could be revealed. Whether this prophecy was an old superstition or simply a tale spun by storytellers, it gained a chilling weight as the decades rolled on. Each new expedition carried not only dreams of riches, but also a shadow of fear. Men came to Oak Island determined to outwit its defenses, but many left broken, bankrupt, or worse. In 1909, the island attracted one of its most famous seekers, the future U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. At the time, Roosevelt was a young Harvard student with a thirst for adventure and a fascination for mysteries. Along with a group of investors, he became involved in the search for the Oak Island treasure. Although Roosevelt himself never dug directly into the pit, his investment and lifelong interest in the story gave the mystery a new prestige. For the rest of his life, even during his presidency, Roosevelt kept an eye on Oak Island's progress, asking for updates on each new attempt. His involvement showed just how far the legend had spread. The money pit was now on the radar of the most powerful men in the world. The early 20th century saw several attempts to conquer the island. Companies came and went, each convinced that they would be the ones to break through the defenses. Some brought in advanced drilling equipment, while others tried to drain the pit with pumps far stronger than those used in the 1800s. Yet time and again, the same problem returned: flooding. The sea tunnels, designed centuries before, continued to foil every effort. It was as if the island itself refused to give up its secrets. In 1928, a new group, the Old Gold Salvage and Wrecking Company, led by Frederick Blair, took control of the search. Blair was a determined man, obsessed with solving the mystery. His team dug new shafts and attempted to seal off the flood tunnels. But the island fought back once more. Their shafts collapsed, pumps failed, and their funds eventually dried up. By the end of the 1930s, Oak Island was once again silent, its treasures still untouchable. But if the early 20th century was filled with failure, the mid-century brought both tragedy and deeper intrigue. In the 1950s, a man named Robert Restall became the latest in a long line of treasure hunters. Restall was deeply fascinated by Oak Island and moved his entire family to live on the island while he worked tirelessly to uncover its secrets. For years, he battled the pit, digging new shafts and searching for the elusive treasure. Then, in 1965, tragedy struck. Restall and his son were working in a shaft when they were suddenly overcome by poisonous gas, likely from the disturbed soil and water. Both collapsed instantly. When others rushed in to save them, they too were overcome. In the end, 4 men lost their lives that day, including Restall and his son. The event shocked the world and gave terrifying new strength to the legend of the curse. Now, with 6 deaths recorded on Oak Island, many whispered that only one more life remained before the prophecy would be fulfilled. Despite the horror of the Restall tragedy, Oak Island continued to attract seekers. Just 2 years later, in 1967, two bold men, David Tobias and Dan Blankenship, purchased most of the island and formed a new company to continue the hunt. Blankenship, in particular, would become one of the most enduring figures in Oak Island's history. A man of unshakable determination, he dedicated the rest of his life to solving the mystery. Over the decades, Blankenship faced countless setbacks, but he never abandoned the quest. His resilience became legendary, a symbol of the human spirit's refusal to surrender in the face of an unsolvable riddle. By the late 20th century, the Oak Island mystery had grown far beyond a local curiosity. Television crews, journalists, and treasure hunters from across the globe came to Mahone Bay to witness the quest. Stories of strange discoveries only added fuel to the fire. Drilling had brought up scraps of parchment, pieces of chain, and fragments of metal. Some claimed to have found traces of mercury, leading to wild theories about secret documents preserved underground. Others insisted they had uncovered proof of hidden vaults deep below the surface. Each discovery seemed to point towards something extraordinary just out of reach, and each failure only deepened the legend. As the century came to a close, Oak Island stood as a monument to both human ambition and human frustration. Generations had spent their fortunes, risked their lives, and devoted their time to the island, yet the treasure remained hidden. The curse loomed larger than ever, especially with 6 deaths already recorded. Still, the promise of unimaginable riches, or perhaps priceless history, kept the dream alive. The 20th century had given Oak Island its most famous tragedies, its most determined seekers, and its darkest moments. But it had also prepared the stage for the next chapter, one where modern technology, global media, and a new generation of adventurers would take up the challenge. The curse had not been broken, the treasure had not been found, but the legend had become unstoppable. And as the 21st century dawned, Oak Island was about to step into the spotlight like never before. The treasure or the truth. As the 21st century began, Oak Island was no longer just a legend whispered among treasure hunters or a curiosity for locals in Nova Scotia, it had become a global phenomenon. Generations of seekers had come and gone, fortunes had been lost, and 6 lives had already been claimed by the island's mysterious curse. Yet, the dream of uncovering Oak Island's secrets burned brighter than ever. With the dawn of modern technology, many believed that the centuries-old riddle might finally be solved. In the early 2000s, ownership of Oak Island shifted into new hands. Enter Rick and Marty Laginer, brothers from Michigan, whose fascination with Oak Island began when they were young boys. Inspired by an old magazine article they read as children, the Laginer brothers grew up with an unshakable curiosity about the money pit. For most, Oak Island was a story, a legend to be enjoyed from afar. But for Rick and Marty, it was a calling. And when they finally purchased a controlling interest in the island, they stepped into a legacy filled with both hope and danger. Unlike many who came before them, the Laginers were determined to approach the island differently. They combined passion with discipline, blending the excitement of discovery with the power of modern science. Their search wasn't fueled purely by dreams of gold, it was about uncovering history, solving a mystery that had baffled humanity for over 200 years. With their arrival, Oak Island was no longer a forgotten riddle. Thanks to their partnership with television producers, the world was invited to join the journey through the hit series, The Curse of Oak Island. The show captivated millions. Viewers from across the globe watched as the brothers and their team used cutting-edge equipment, ground-penetrating radar, seismic testing, underwater exploration, and heavy drilling rigs, to investigate the island. For the first time, the hunt for the Oak Island treasure wasn't hidden away in private company reports or whispered among locals. It was laid bare for the entire world to see. And with this new transparency came discoveries that reignited the mystery like never before. Pieces of evidence began to emerge from the soil and waters of Oak Island, fragments of wood dated to centuries before the money pit was discovered, iron spikes that hinted at ancient construction, coins from the 16th and 17th centuries, and even pieces of parchment and leather that suggested something far more significant than mere pirate treasure. Each find deepened the riddle: what exactly was buried here, and who had gone to such incredible lengths to protect it? The theories grew wilder with each revelation. Some believed Oak Island concealed the lost treasure of the Knights Templar, hidden after the order was dissolved in the 14th century. Others argued it was the final resting place of Shakespeare's missing manuscripts, secreted away to protect the true authorship. Still more claimed it could be Aztec gold, relics of the Ark of the Covenant, or even Marie Antoinette's missing jewels smuggled out of France during the Revolution. Each theory brought with it passionate believers, and the island became a stage for history's most dramatic possibilities. But even with modern tools, Oak Island remained defiant. Time and again, the Laginers and their team were met with collapsed tunnels, unexpected flooding, and the sheer difficulty of excavating centuries-old shafts reinforced with timber. It was as if the original builders had engineered their work not just to hide something, but to keep it hidden forever. And the curse loomed over every effort. Still only 6 lives had been taken, leaving many to wonder whether the 7th and final life would mark the moment the treasure revealed itself. Yet through it all, Rick and Marty pressed forward, not just chasing gold, but chasing truth. They reminded the world that Oak Island's real treasure might not be a chest of coins or jewels, but the story itself, the chance to connect with history, to touch the work of hands long gone, and to solve a mystery that had outlived empires. As of today, the secret of Oak Island remains locked beneath its soil and stone. The treasure has not been found, at least, not fully. But discoveries continue, each one a piece of a puzzle stretching back centuries. Perhaps one day, the money pit will yield its ultimate secret. Or perhaps its curse will keep the truth hidden forever. What cannot be denied, however, is Oak Island's place in legend. For more than 200 years, it has captured the imagination of dreamers, scholars, and adventurers alike. From Franklin Roosevelt to the Laginer brothers, from whispered tales of pirates to global television screens, Oak Island has become more than a mystery. It has become a symbol of humanity's eternal hunger to seek, to discover, and to uncover the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, that is the greatest treasure of all.